Hi everybody, it's Jenny here from Moonkusser Art. I'm happy to have you guys back and check out what I'm working on. I was given the opportunity to test out of some of the new product from Teexpert. This is their silicone rubber for making resin art molds, so I'm gonna give that a try. They sent me a great little kit, came with the 1:1 ratio silicone rubber for the mold making, and they included the epoxy resin for filling the molds, so very nice of them. Anyway, they gave me all kinds of little things to measure with and sticks to use, and even some of the little, what do they call these things? They're just, pipettes. That's what they're called. Anyway, so I've got all the things I need here. I have a plastic cup, I have some silicone caulk, and I have a bigger container for a bigger piece that I'm going to try doing. So I'm going to mix everything up, and I'm going to take you guys along with me while I try this out for the very first time. All right, I have my cookie sheet here, and I've placed a small piece of contact paper. It has an adhesive backing, so it's sticking on this non-stick cookie sheet. So that's good. I had one edge over here curling up a little bit, so I stuck a little bit of tape there to help hold it down. I made sure that there's no wrinkles in this. And I'm going to be using my hot glue gun. It's quite old, but it is still quite good. So I'm going to start warming up my glue in that stand there. All right, so I'm going to heat up my hot glue. And this is the top of the 9-ounce clear plastic cup. I don't know about you guys, if you're working in resin, you've got a lot of cups around the house, and I like to have them in all different sizes and shapes. I don't know why. My favorite is reusing my yogurt cups, but I have some of these on hand as well, depending on the project I'm working on. So I took these cups and I cut them. So I just, I made a mark about where I want the opening to be at the top, and I'm going to take my hot glue once it gets warm, and I'm going to run a bead around that. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I tried using my silicone caulk on my first attempt, and I put silicone caulk around my edge here, and the silicone let go. And guess what? I had silicone pouring all over the place. It was a huge mess. That stuff is sticky. Sticky stuff. This stuff, hard to get off of things. Anyway, so I'm going to give this a try. I've seen a couple of other artists use this method, so I'm going to give that a try. I'm going to be making a mold of this little flower here. Cute little flower. And I also am going to try, I'm going to do two ways. So in this one, I'm going to be taking the flower and I'm going to be placing it in to the silicone, and we'll see how that works. And the other method I'm going to try is, this is a plastic lid from a coffee can. And I already hot glued this flower down onto that plastic lid. And once this stuff finally gets heated up, one day, I'm going to use my other cup, and I'm going to set it. It actually sets pretty nicely right in there. I'm going to set that in and hot glue that down, and then I'm going to pour the silicone on top. So I'm trying two different ways. I'm not 100% positive that I got a good seal because I put the hot glue on the flower, and then I pressed it onto the plastic lid. So the potential is I'm going to have some seepage underneath there. But the way I look at it is that's okay, because I'll just, cut that off. So we'll see how it goes, right? Playing around and testing new things. So let me get this. I'm not sure why it's not starting to drip any glue, but I'm going to start doing my thing here. All right, I have the hot glue is on there. I'm hoping the hot glue doesn't let go of the plastic there. And the hot glue is holding really tight on here. I was really careful to go around there and make sure. Well, now I can see one little spot right there. So I'm gonna hit it with some more hot glue because I can see an opening right there, and any little openings, you can see one over here too. So you want to be so careful, otherwise your silicone is going to escape. So I'm going to make sure I have those touched up. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to batch up my silicone. So if you notice, I labeled my lids. They're both white. So when they're both white, I like to label them, because if you put one on the wrong bottle, well, there's a problem. Because this, just like resin, once you combine them, it starts a chemical reaction. And if you're putting the wrong lids on the wrong bottles, guess what? You're going to have a chemical reaction, and you might get a lid that's stuck onto your bottle. So label your lids. This is to be measured by weight. So I am going to be using my digital scale, and it's a 1-to-1 by weight. So the same weight of part A to the same weight of part B. That's how you mix it. They say to mix it for 5 minutes and then to let it sit for about 5 minutes. And that's hopefully gonna let the bubbles rise up to the surface. I'm gonna start really slow because I don't want to incorporate any bubbles. If you have any bubbles in your silicone, that's going to create pockets on your mold that potentially will give you a poor result in your mold. So I'm going to do that, and let's do it now. Teexpert gave me some nice little measuring cups and some popsicle sticks to use for this project. So I will use that. Let's see. So doesn't matter which one I add in here first. So I'm going to zero out my scale using my little container. Now this has incremental measurements for millimeters, but that's not by ounces, and we're measuring by weight. So we're going to put our cup on the scale, and I'm going to zero it out, and I am going to measure out how much silicone I think I need. Oh, don't you hate it when your scale just turns off on you? Always keep another one handy. Turn it back on. Zero it back out. Put that one on. All right, so I'm at 1.6. I'm going to make sure I have enough for this. Keep my scale active. So I'm going to do 2 ounces of each. And it's tricky to pour this stuff because you can see I get a string of product. So that's 2 fluid ounces of A. And here we go. Keep going. Stay busy. So now I'm going to go up to 4 so that I have half and half by weight of each. You kind of have to predict where you're going to end up. Why have you stopped weighing? Oh boy. Am I going to overfill my little container? I just might. Interesting. All right. So I'm at my 4 fluid ounces total. And I'm done with this. Now, I'm going to stir for a little bit just so I can begin to incorporate it. But like I said, I'm going to stir this very slowly because I do not want to incorporate bubbles. When you have bubbles, you've got troubles. That's a good one. When you got bubbles, you got troubles. I like it. Okay. Back to work here. So you definitely want to be able to mix it again 5 minutes. So I'm going to stir slowly, trying to avoid going fast, but I do need to do just like with resin. I need to scrape my sides. I do not want to have any spots that are not mixed properly. All right, I've mixed it very slowly for 5 minutes, and even though I mixed as slowly as I possibly could, I see that I have bubbles in here, and I can see that they are coming up to the surface and popping. Now, Teexpert says that it's bubble free. So what I'm going to do to try to get it to be bubble free is I'm going to let it sit. I'm going to time it. I'm going to give it 5 minutes to sit here in the hopes that a lot of these bubbles are going to come to the surface and pop so that I can get a good mold. See you later. Okay, it's been 5 minutes and I still see bubbles coming up to the surface. I doubt very much that you guys can see that. Put some bright light over here and try to get, but I can see them in here. And again, I mixed as slowly as I possibly could with the thought of being able to get a good mix. So don't know if you guys can see the bubbles coming up, but I can. They're in there. So let's get our concoctions over here, right? And let's start. You can see, I think you can see See the bubbles just sitting on the stick. Now a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, it's a stick, so you're going to get bubbles because it's a stick. Yeah. Okay. They gave me a stick to use. So. All right, let's start on this one here. Just going to pour it right in and let it flow. So the good news is I don't see any silicone coming out around the edges, so that's good. Happy for that. I made sure that my tabletop is level. That's really important. And if you guys have used silicone molds, you know that if they're really thin at the bottom, they have a tendency to warp with time. So I'm going to give my molds an extra little bit of help by giving them a thick bottom. So I see lots of bubbles in here, loads of them, loads and loads of bubbles. All right. And I'm thinking as this slows down, they're not going to come out. So that's going to be disappointing. And I am not going to have enough for that mold. I'm trying to think, you know, what to do to get these bubbles out. You can't use a torch on it. I'm sitting here looking at the bubbles popping, but I know they're going to, you know, it's going to just keep slowing down and eventually they're not going to be able to pop out of there. So we'll see in the end how it works as far as, you know, I'm just trying to think what are good things that I can do to try to help my mold here not have bubbles up against where I'm going to be filling. So I'm going to massage the mold so that hopefully the bubbles won't be up against the flower part. I don't know. You know, it's just not bubble free. Lots of bubbles in there. And if mixing with a stick is not a good thing, then why do you give me a stick, right? These are all questions I have. I don't know about you guys, but these are my questions. Okay. Look at it from the side. I think that's deep enough. So let's put what we've got in here over here. Now, I don't think that that's going to be deep enough. My worry is this is going to be heavy and it's going to sink. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that sit for a little bit and thicken up. Good news that I don't see any silicone coming out around my edges. So that's a big whoopee. And like I said, I'm going to let that set up a little bit, and then I'm going to batch up just a little bit more silicone, and I'm pretty sure they will bond with one another. And yeah, that's what we're going to do. Stay tuned. All right, it has been about 15 minutes, and I've been watching, and I'm not seeing any more bubbles rising up to the surface. So the bubbles that are popped are going to be popped at this point, I think. Same thing on this one. I'm not seeing anything come to the surface anymore to pop. So if they're in there, they're in there. So I mixed up a little bit more silicone, and since I was waiting for this to set up a little bit, I put it in my vacuum chamber, and I gave it a round in the vacuum chamber and popped all the bubbles in there. So this has no bubbles in it. A lot of gases came out when I put it in the vacuum chamber. So this has been through the chamber, and the bubbles have now been removed out of that round. So I want to set it on here. I'm going to take this and I'm going to set it on top. Like I said, I have concerns that this is going to sink. It might. If it sinks, you know, you guys learn right along with me. That's what these tests are all about. So, you know, try to center it in my container, and there it goes. I'm pretty sure that sank because it's right up to the edge. So now I don't even need to pour any of this in there. Now I don't know what to do with this. Oh my goodness. I'm back again. So the minute I turned off the camera, I had a giant bubble pop up in this one. So that meant that my hot glue on the bottom let go. It was tilting. This piece on the bottom was tilting. So I knew that the hot glue had let go. And so I took my stick and I pushed it down. And another big bubble popped up. And I pushed it down again. And another big bubble popped up. So it's got, you know, the air is trapped underneath there, and the silicone wanted to fill those voids. So, okay, go ahead, silicone, fill those voids, get in there, do your thing. Who am I to tell you not to do it? So instead of pouring this silicone on top of that one, because I'm pretty sure that it sank to the bottom, I'm gonna see if I can carefully get it in at the edges. I might have to, you know, ditch this effort. Because if this is floating, which I don't think it is, no, it is not, guys. Yeah, you can see that the silicone is just starting to go over the edge here, so that's done. I'm not adding any more silicone, but I am going to add this silicone on top here because I want to make sure that my base is, like I said, I want it to be thick. So let's keep that down at the bottom. You know, what the heck? What am I going to do with this? I'm just going to pour the whole thing in there. Okay. So even just pouring it in, you know, I'm introducing bubbles again. So just be aware of that, because, you know, this is my first time using silicone and trying to make a mold, and I'm learning, and you guys are watching me struggle here. You know, everybody's like, oh, how hard can it be? It's hard. It's hard. And I am not the expert. So maybe this will be a video on, you know, what not to do. I don't know. All right, so that one is definitely at the bottom now. This one I can see over here. I've got a little bit of silicone running over top. So I'm pretty sure that this flower sank to the bottom, so it's going to have a thin bottom to it. You know, again, learning. And we will see tomorrow when we unmold these little things, all right? See you then. It is the next day. The molds have been sitting for, I would say, 18 hours. And they're firm. So that tells me I can demold them. This one is the one that I hot glued right down to the contact sheet. So that's going to be prying up. But this one was on the coffee lid. So let's see how this goes. And there we have it. Great. So let's get a good look at it. There's the mold. Like I said, it looks good. I don't see any bubbles on the surface of the mold, so that's good news. I can see bubbles in the silicone, but I do not see any bubbles on the surface. And if you remember, when I poured it, I took a popsicle stick and I went around and massaged the silicone onto the flower. So maybe that released any of the bubbles that were on the surface from sticking there. I can see a few things there, but it's got a nice thick bottom, so that's going to help to keep the structure of the mold when I fill it, so that's good. I'm happy with that. Just like with resin, there's a little bit of a lip edge around on the side. I don't know if you guys can see that there. There you go. So I'll take either a razor blade or some kind of tool, and I'll trim that off to try to make that as flat as possible. Again, my tray was on a level surface, and that's really important when you're pouring molds, just like when you're pouring resin. So that came out good. So there's that one. Now let's see what we got with this one. I'm just going to pull that contact off of the tray. That was easy. Remember, this one I dropped into the top, and you can see that it was beginning to sink, so I'm not sure where it went. You guys are finding out just as I am finding out. So it releases easily from the contact, and I had no seepage around my edges, so that was good news. All right, let go. Here we are. And this is thin, but the silicone is there. So that's good. Let's push it out of the cup, just like that. And now let's get this flower out of here. Breaking that loose. So it's breaking through, even though, you know, there are spots where it's seeped over that edge. Get my big. So I'm actually, you know, kind of tearing the silicone there a little bit where it sank. I'll go really careful on this spot because it's a little bit thicker to get it to break. Well, it's going to tear there. Okay. So, pull the flour out. Okay. All right. Now, flour came out clean. I'll do a little bit to get that off, but that's fine. So here's a close-up look at this. And can you guys see the bubbles through there? Okay. So remember this one, what I did was I poured, maybe you can see it on that side. I poured the resin that I had stirred slowly. And you can see the bubbles. So I poured a layer, I ran out, I let it sit for about a half hour to let it kind of firm up. And then I had batched a little bit more that I poured in. And that one had been through the vacuum chamber. So what I set the flour into, even though there was some on the top, the flour is thick and it's got some weight to it, so it sank to the bottom. So that's what we've got there. So I can see those bubbles, you know, even though Teexpert is calling it bubble free. I think I was very careful in stirring it to introduce very few bubbles, but the bubbles are there. They did not work their way out. So I would recommend putting it into a vacuum chamber because that really removed the bubbles. If you want to make sure that you don't get any bubbles up against where your mold is going to be taken, put it through the vacuum chamber. All right, so there we go. Now the next step will be using the mold, and we'll see what the results look like. So stay tuned for that. All right, so we're just going to batch up some resin from Teexpert, and we're going to test out these molds. This is a 1-to-1 ratio. Let's see, what do they say on here? Equal parts of resin and hardener by volume. So I don't have to have the scale. I'm going to use a little cup here. And I'm going to stir slowly for 3 to 5 minutes. I'm going to try not to incorporate too many bubbles in here, so again, going slow and making sure that I scrape the sides, because the last thing you want to do is not scrape the sides. That will ruin your batch, because if you pour it from the same container, you're going to get spots of unmixed resin going into your mold, and that's going to ruin your project. So let's stir. All right, that's all mixed. I do have a couple of bubbles in there, but not bad at all. Not bad at all. All right, so I'm going to color this resin. Since these are both dark colors, I thought I would color these flowers white. So I'm just going to add a little bit. This is Flow Art Resin Liquid Pigments. This white is the brightest white I have ever used. It's a favorite of mine. I did not put any kind of mold release or alcohol, and I did that on purpose. I want to see how good the resin releases from this silicone. Now, I'm seeing an issue with this mold because it appears as if it's not level. And that would have been because the flour, when it became unglued on the bottom, and I pushed it back down, it wasn't quite level on that. So that's my fault. I'll take the blame for that. So who else am I going to blame? Nobody. So we'll level that out a little bit like that. You know, again, this is my first time making a silicone mold. So you guys are seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's okay by me because you learn from my mistakes. I hope you do anyway. So I'm okay with making mistakes. We all make them. And I always say I learn the best from my mistakes. So I think that one looks pretty good. Let's pour more in here. So there we go. And I'm going to let those cure overnight. This resin, when I used it before, it took longer for it to dry, to cure. So I'll check it in the morning and see if it's in good shape. These molds are on the deeper side, so they're about a 1/2 inch deep. Sometimes that makes the resin cure faster when it's deeper. So that could very well be the case. There's a little bit more for it to create a reaction. So that's it for today. We'll see you in the morning. Good morning, everybody. The resin is hard. Here are my two that I created the molds with. So let's get those off of there. And here's a little something that I had some leftover resin. And I have these necklace pendant blanks. So I took some of the resin from Teexpert and made a couple of pendants using that. They came out pretty good, I think. So that's cool. All right, let's see how the molds work. Release is coming out really, they're popping off very easily, so that's good. That's what you want. And there it is. Looks good. Nice little flower. And I am not seeing any bubble imperfections on the surface. That looks good. This one turned out well. The mold worked really nicely on that one. So I'm very happy with how the silicone performed and how that one looks. So that's a really good one. And let's see how this one worked. Now this is the one that's very thin. So let's check it out. All right, you let go nicely. And on this one, I can see imperfections in the surface, and that would be from the bubbles. So this one, even, because this one, I didn't do the massaging thing that I did on this mold when the piece was in there, and I rubbed the stick on the surface of the flower while it was in there. And I think that's what took any bubbles from staying on that mold. On this one, I did not do that. And I can see like right here. Oh, it's so hard to pick up on the camera. But there are little imperfections, little, you know, you can see the bubbles because it's in the reverse. So you can see that they filled the bubbles. The epoxy went into those bubbles. So that's cool. I learned a lot doing this. I learned that I like this method of having it on the bottom of the mold. So I already have some ideas from my first attempt on what I'm going to do different. So I am going to try doing this again, and we'll see if I can't figure out, you know, a better way, and we'll make some molds another time. But this overall, I'll say, is a success. There's my originals, and I'm very pleased with how the silicone molding product from Teexpert worked. I will put a link to their product on the description box, and that way you guys can check it out yourselves and give making silicone molds a try for your resin projects. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you here next time on Moonkusser Art.